Okay, let's unpack this. Think about vehicles designed for really serious work.
Right, the heavy lifting stuff.
Exactly. Tasks that need, immense power, serious capability. The kind of thing where your average truck just won't do.
Absolutely. This isn't just getting around town. This is the heavy-duty workhorse category built for the absolute toughest jobs.
And today, yeah, we're doing a deep dive into one of the big players there, the 2025 Ford Super Duty.
A real titan in the segment.
For sure. We're using our sources, like this piece from Cars Press, to pull out all the details. Our goal here is to figure out what makes this truck tick, what makes it a symbol of strength and toughness.
Going beyond just the shiny pictures.
Right. We want to understand, based on the material we've got, what are the key specs? What features really stand out? How does it measure up against the competition? And, what are the real pros and cons?
And that capability, it really starts with the numbers, doesn't it? The source mentions towing up to 40,000 pounds. That number alone tells you a lot. Seriously, 40,000 pounds. Wow. That immediately says, okay, different class of vehicle. So let's start right there. What does Super Duty actually mean in Ford's world, according to the source?
Well, the source defines Super Duty as Ford's heavy-duty lineup. So that's your F-250, F-350, F-450.
Okay.
And the key thing it says is they have beefed-up components. Think stronger axles, tougher suspension, more robust transmissions, all engineered specifically to handle way more towing and payload than, say, light-duty F-150.
Built for the really demanding stuff.
Exactly. Commercial use, industrial jobs, or even just really, really heavy recreational trailers.
So it's fundamentally about that engineered strength for those extreme loads.
Okay.
And the source calls out the top line numbers that result from that, right?
It does. It gives that max towing figure up to 40,000 pounds. Specifically says you need the right setup with the 6.7L high output Power Stroke diesel for that.
Got it.
And it also mentions a maximum payload capacity of 8,000 pounds. Those are sort of the headline capability figures. Okay, 8,000 pounds payload, 40,000 towing. To get that kind of muscle, you obviously need some serious engines under the hood. The source lists 4 options.
Yeah, 4 distinct choices, which suggest they're covering different needs and budgets.
Right.
So starting with the gas engines, there's a 6.8-liter V8. That one puts out 400 horsepower and 445 pound-feet of torque.
Okay, decent start.
Then you can step up to a bigger gas engine, the 7.3-liter V8. That gets you 430 horsepower and 485 pound-feet.
And then you get into the diesels. That's where the really big torque numbers usually show up, the kind you need for pulling those huge loads.
Absolutely. The standard diesel is the 6.7-liter Power Stroke V8. That delivers 475 horsepower and a very healthy 1,050 pound-feet of torque.
1050, yeah, that's already serious.
But then for the absolute maximum capability, there's the high output version of that 6.7-liter Power Stroke. That bumps things up to 500 horsepower and a massive 1,200 pound-feet of torque.
1,200, wow. That figure alone just screams pulling power.
It really does. That's what gets those massive trailers moving off the line.
And how does the truck actually manage all that power? Transmission, drivetrain options?
Yeah, so the source says Ford's 10-speed torque shift automatic transmission is standard across the board no matter which engine you pick.
Okay.
And then you've got the fundamental choices: rear-wheel drive or 4x4. Plus, depending on the model and how much capacity you need, you can get single rear wheels or dual rear wheels, the dually setup. It's all about configuring it for the specific job.
The source even mentions some performance figures, which is kind of interesting for a heavy-duty truck.
Yeah, a little surprising. It lists 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 5.5 seconds, which, for something this big, is pretty quick.
Really?
And a top speed listed at 160 kilometers per hour.
What about fuel economy? The source gives a number that seems, a bit odd.
It does. It states 6.7 liters per 100 kilometers, and strangely, it says that applies to both city and highway driving.
Identical city and highway. That's unusual.
Yeah, the source doesn't really explain why they're listed as the same. Could be an artifact of the data, maybe specific test cycles. Unclear. But to give it range, you've got big fuel tanks, options for 110, 129, or even a huge 182 liters.
Right. Got to feed those engines. Okay, let's step outside the truck. How does the source describe the exterior look?
It calls the design bold, which, these trucks tend to be.
Fair enough.
Feature-wise, it mentions some practical things. LED lighting, like on the mirrors and in the cargo bed. Power folding mirrors useful for tight spots or garages. And a bed assist step.
Yeah, the little step. Simple but probably essential on a tall truck like this if you're actually using the bed a lot.
Definitely helps with access.
Okay, let's move inside. The cabin.
Yeah.
How's the source describe the feel in there?
It paints a picture of being both practical and luxurious. It mentions higher quality materials, specifically calling out Venetian leather and slate sapel wood trim on the fancy upper trims like Platinum and King Ranch.
Okay, so luxury touches.
Yeah, and things like adjustable ambient lighting with 10 colors. Adds a bit of atmosphere.
So that's the luxury side. Where does the practical part come in, according to the source?
The practicality seems baked into the layout. It highlights some clever storage ideas, like a movable workspace that can sit between the front seats, good for a laptop or doing paperwork on a job site.
Ah, interesting.
And under-seat storage in the back to stash gear out of sight. Plus, the expected modern stuff. USB-C ports, wireless charging, keep everything powered up.
And the seats themselves. Sounds like they're designed for long hauls.
Seems like it. The source mentions front seats with heating, cooling, and even massage functions in the higher trims. Helps fight fatigue on long drives.
Massage seats in a work truck. Times change.
Right. Plus adjustable lumbar support, memory settings for multiple drivers. And for the back seats, it notes good legroom, a 15-degree recline. And on the very top, limited trim, electric folding rear seats.
Electric folding. Nice for quickly making more cargo space inside.
Okay, now, the actual work area, the truck bed, what does the source say about that? It describes a reinforced steel bed, naturally, built tough, has a scratch-resistant coating to handle abuse, available up to 8 feet long, so you can fit plenty of material.
Standard stuff for a heavy-duty bed.
Pretty much. It also mentions integrated LED lighting in the bed for working after dark. But the options are interesting. It highlights the available electric folding tailgate, which Ford calls Pro Power Onboard.
Ah, Pro Power. And that's one with the built-in generator, right?
Exactly. It integrates 220V power outlets right into the bed. Super useful on a work site or camping. It also mentions payload sensors.
Payload sensors. How do those work?
They apparently display the weight in the bed right on the truck's digital screen. Helps you know if you're approaching the limit, which is a big deal for safety and legality.
Okay, yeah, that's smart tech for actually using the truck. Let's talk more about the tech inside the cabin, infotainment and stuff.
Right. The centerpiece is that 12-inch SYNC4 touchscreen. The source says it has voice commands and built-in navigation. And crucially, the navigation works even offline, without a cell signal.
That's huge if you're working out in remote areas.
Absolutely. For audio, there's an optional 14-speaker B&O sound system in the Platinum Plus trim, and it mentions noise cancellation tech to help quiet down the cabin, especially with those big diesel engines.
Nice. Connectivity.
Yep, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are supported. And there's an option for a 10-inch screen for the rear passengers, lets them watch their own stuff.
And what about cameras? Big trucks need good visibility aids.
For sure. The source mentions an available 360-degree camera system, really helpful for parking or maneuvering this beast. It specifically calls out a transparent view mode, which sounds like it helps you see obstacles right around the truck.
Okay.
Oh, and later in the pros list, it mentions a head-up display, the HUD that projects info onto the windshield. Doesn't give details on what it shows, but notes it's available.
Got it. So it's listed as a pro, a feature of value, but the source doesn't elaborate further. Now, how does all this heavy-duty chassis and suspension translate into how the truck actually rides?
Well, the suspension setup is pretty classic heavy-duty. Control arms up front, solid axle with leaf springs in the back. Robust.
Built for load carrying.
Exactly. And the source notes that, like most trucks in this class, the ride is pretty stiff when the bed's empty. You feel the bumps more.
Makes sense.
But it says the ride improves significantly once you put some weight back there or hook up a trailer. That's when the suspension is doing what it's designed for. It also mentions that the higher trims, Lariat, King Ranch, Platinum, get better noise insulation and maybe some tweaks to the suspension tuning for a bit more refinement.
So optimized for work, not necessarily for cruising around empty. Let's talk safety. The source lists a ton of driver assist systems.
Yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive list. You've got pre-collision assist with automatic emergency braking, blind spot monitoring that also covers a trailer you're towing.
Oh, trailer coverage is key.
Definitely. Lane keeping system, adaptive cruise control that can handle stop-and-go traffic, and even help with steering. Then there's the 360 cam, intersection assist, exit warning. Post-collision braking is mentioned too, plus the core stability stuff, advanced track ESC, curve control, trailer sway control. Lots of tech aimed at helping the driver manage this large vehicle.
That is a lot of assist tech. But what about the traditional crash tests? NHTSA, IIHS, The source had something specific to say there, didn't it?
It did, and it's an important point. It states the 2025 Super Duty hasn't been tested by NHTSA, that's the U.S. government's five-star program, and the IIHS, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, they just don't rate heavy-duty trucks of this size class at all.
So no official star ratings or top safety pick awards like you see on smaller vehicles?
Correct. According to this source, those specific third-party crash ratings from the usual agencies aren't available. So the safety discussion really revolves around all those assist systems we just listed.
That's really important context. It doesn't mean it's unsafe, just that you lack that specific benchmark. Okay, moving on. Who does the source see as the main competition for the Super Duty?
It points to the usual suspects in the heavy-duty truck wars: the Chevy Silverado HD, the GMC Sierra HD, and the Ram Heavy Duty, specifically the 2500 and 3500 models.
The big three, basically.
Pretty much.
And how does the source quickly compare them? Any key call-outs?
It gives little snapshots. For the Chevy Silverado HD, it mentions its engine options, like the 6.6-liter V8, notes a max towing figure of 20,000 pounds in the source's comparison point, and highlights its towing tech and camera systems.
Yep.
The GMC Sierra HD, which shares a lot with the Silverado, is positioned as maybe a bit more luxurious, especially the Denali trims.
Okay.
Same 6.6-liter V8 mentioned, plus its unique multi-pro tailgate and similar tow tech.
Right, the fancy tail.
And then the Ram Heavy Duty, the 2500 and 3500, the source notes its available horsepower and makes a point about its best-in-class available torque claim from the Cummins diesel up to 1,075 pound-foot. That puts it right in the fight with Ford's high-output diesel.
So Ram's big torque number is a key differentiator they push.
Seems like it. The source also mentions Ram's optional rear air suspension, which is unique in the class, plus its own high-tech cabins and towing assists.
Okay, so based on the source, it's a tight race. GM brings shared tech, unique features like the tailgate, maybe leans into luxury with GMC. Ram pushes hard on diesel torque and offers that air suspension. Ford aims for those top capability numbers and a wide range of tech.
That seems to be the landscape painted by the source, yeah. Each has its angle.
Now, how does Ford structure the actual Super Duty lineup? Models, trims, and what did the source say about pricing?
The models are F250, F350, and F450, covering different capability levels. Trim-wise, it goes from the very basic XL work truck, vinyl seats, steel wheels kind of thing, all the way up to the super luxurious Platinum and King Ranch trims.
Wide range.
Definitely. Pricing, though, the source was limited. It only gave starting prices for two places. The UAE, where an F350 Crew Cab SRW XL starts around 296,000 AED, and Kuwait, where an F550 chassis cab starts around 12,500 kWd.
Specific but limited.
Yeah, it explicitly says pricing wasn't available in source material for Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Bahrain, Egypt, or Jordan.
And those are just starting prices for base models. The source mentioned costs can climb steeply.
Oh, yeah. Later on in the cons section, it points out that high prices for upper trims are a drawback, noting they can easily blow past $90,000 US open.
$90,000 for a pickup truck. Wow. Okay, let's get some physical specs. Dimensions. Weight. How big is this thing?
The source gives some numbers in a table. Length, about 232 inches or almost 5.9 meters. Width, without mirrors, is 80 inches, just over 2 meters. Height is around 81 inches, also over 2 meters tall. Wheelbase is 142 inches, 3.6 meters. And ground clearance is about 8.5 inches or 21.6 centimeters.
So yeah, big. How about weight?
For the specific configuration in that table, the curb weight, just the truck itself, is listed at 6,148 pounds, roughly 2,800 kilograms.
Okay.
The max payload for that specific model is 3,752 pounds, about 1,700 kilograms. This clarifies the earlier 8,000 pounds figure is the absolute max across the entire line, not for every single configuration.
Right, depends on the exact F250, 350, 450 build.
Exactly. And the gross vehicle weight rating, or GVWR, the total allowed weight of the truck plus payload and passengers, is 9,900 pounds, almost 4,500 kilograms for that example.
Just substantial numbers all around. That size impacts maneuverability, but it's also key to its capability.
What about colors? Any examples?
Yeah, the source says there's a good variety. It lists off things like Avalanche, Agate Black, Antimatter Blue, Carbonized Gray, Oxford White, Race Red. Some metallic and tri-coat options too, like Star White or Ruby Red. A decent mix.
Standard truck colors plus some fancier ones. Where are these actually built?
According to the source, primarily in the U.S., 2 plants. The Kentucky truck plant in Louisville and the Ohio assembly plant in Avon Lake.
Okay.
But there's big news on that front. The source mentions Ford announced in July 2024 they're adding Super Duty production at their Oakville plant in Canada, starting in 2026. Goal is to boost annual production by another 100,000 units.
Wow, 100,000 more. That shows they expect strong demand. And historically, any sense of how many Super Duties are out there? The source gives some context. Ford hit 5 million produced back in 2014. Just in 2023, they built over 300,000 of them, mostly in Kentucky. Based on that history, since the Super Duty line launched around 1999, the source estimates total production is now over 8 million trucks.
8 million. It's a lot of heavy-duty trucks on the road. Says something about its market position over the years.
Definitely speaks to its popularity and longevity.
And the source even gave a little tip for buyers.
Yeah. A little nugget suggesting the best time to maybe snag a deal is towards the end of the calendar year, like November or December. Standard advice, often tied to dealers hitting sales goals.
Always good to keep in mind. Okay, so we've gone through a ton of details from the source. Let's try to boil it down. The source laid out some clear pros and cons. What were the main strengths highlighted?
The pros really focus on its core mission. Number 1, exceptional towing and payload. It reiterates those max numbers, 40K towing, 8K payload. Then the powerful engine lineup covering different needs. The interior gets praised for being comfortable and practical. Advanced tech is a big plus, infotainment, safety assists, lots of customization options, like the Tremor off-road package mentioned as an example. And yeah, that whole suite of driver safety systems is listed as a definite positive.
So powerful, capable, customizable, comfortable, and tech-heavy. Sounds like the goal. What about the downsides, the cons listed in the source?
The cons are pretty straightforward, too. That stiff ride when unloaded, it's a consequence of the heavy-duty suspension, but still a con for daily driving comfort if you're often empty.
Right.
High fuel consumption, especially with the gas engines. Expected, but still costly. High pricing, particularly for those loaded upper trims going over 90K is. Maneuverability is called out as challenging due to its sheer size.
Parking must be fun.
Probably not. It also mentions potential for more road and wind noise in the basic trims, maybe with bigger tires. And finally, it explicitly lists the lack of those official NHTSA IIHS crash test ratings as a con, meaning safety evaluation per the source relies heavily on judging the effectiveness of those assist systems.
Okay, so summing it all up based on our sources. The 2025 Ford Super Duty really comes across as this blend of, well, brute strengths for the absolute toughest jobs, with those huge capability numbers, but also trying to offer a lot of modern luxury and smart tech.
Yeah, it seems engineered to combine that raw power needed for serious work with an experience that's, connected, comfortable, and maybe even a bit plush for the driver and crew.
And looking at how the source positions it against the Silverado HD, Sierra HD, Ram Heavy Duty, highlighting their specific strengths like torque claims or unique features, it helps you see where Ford is trying to win in that very competitive space.
Definitely. Whether you're someone who actually needs to tow 30,000 pounds or you just appreciate the engineering behind it, getting into these details clarifies what goes into a truck like this.
It's a deep dive into the balance, the trade-offs involved in building something this capable that still has to function on normal roads with modern expectations.
Absolutely.
Which kind of leads to a final thought, thinking about everything we've covered. The immense power, the sheer physical size and weight of these trucks. And that point from the source about them not being rated by NHTSA or IIHS makes you wonder, doesn't it? For vehicles designed for such extreme capability where those traditional safety benchmarks don't apply, what does safety really mean? How do manufacturers approach it? And how should buyers who are focused on protection and performance think about it?